And welcome to the Daily Space Weather, folks. I'm wearing my effing shirt, and we're looking at the sun on 171 angstroms, but more importantly, we've got an Earth-facing coronal mass ejection. Oh yeah, it's the real deal. I'm not sure what part of the sun it came out of. I think this region right here. And also, I'm going to go out on a limb and I'm going to forecast a sunspot forming right here. You won't see other channels doing this. So, thanks for tuning in here, as there's no place else on the internet to see what we cover daily. Here's a 304 angstroms view. And let's get to the stereo A coronagraph 2. Here you have it. Let's make this full screen here. And you're going to see right at the end of the video here, this happening at approximately 3 UT. Where you see that coronal mass ejection. And let me migrate over here so I can operate the slider. All right, there we go. And there you see that coronal mass ejection. Well, it did produce a halo on the SOHO C3, the LASCO C3. And there you see that. That is Earth facing. Not expected to really cause any damage or anything like that. Significant, but not particularly catastrophic. You heard it here first. And I'll just reanimate there so you can see the date stamps. Let that play through and move on to more stuff like the solar wind. But before we do that, let's look at the LASCO C3, and you're going to see a halo here at the end. The last few frames on this, you can see plasma coming out both sides. You see that? That's that coronal mass ejection. Now, it still could miss largely, but that looks like it's got an Earth-facing component. So within 24 to 48 hours, expect to see some kind of a spike in the solar wind data. Have you become a Patreon patron yet? Well, if not, you can thank our patrons for these videos continuing to exist, as this channel needs funding in a big way, and we are prepared to go full-time. We just have to replace a little bit more income yet per month. You can also donate on PayPal, and you can support the channel via buying CBDs via the Hemp Lucid Spaced Out campaign. That's right, specifically formulated for our spaced out viewers. Some sales still going on over there, so take advantage of that and perhaps improve your health. I mean, we've got certified THC-free isoterp products here, as well as, let's see, the whole plant CBD hemp seed oil suspension, 1,000 milligram size, is still on sale there, 30% off. That's a significant savings. Improve your life, improve your health, get some CBDs. Let's talk about solar cycles briefly before we go into the solar wind. I would note the similarities between cycle 16, which was between 1923 and 1933, as well as cycle 12, taking place between 1878 and 1890, to the current cycle, which is just ending. Actually, I could probably say the next cycle is just beginning, but let's not get into the weeds on cycle 24 versus cycle 25. Solon.info did note another cycle 25 plage just on the 10th, so just 2 days ago. There's another cycle 25 thing, and I'm not sure the location of that one. I didn't really look at it too in depth there. Let's look at the real-time solar wind. Here we are. We just saw a recent big change in the BT-BZ. The BZ angle drastically shifted from around 0 back to the south. There's a huge tug-of-war going on with the solar polar fields right now, and it looks like, to me, the northern solar polar field is increasing in power. So that's a good thing, an indication of, another indication of cycle 25 commencing. Solar wind density much higher than yesterday, 5.21 protons per cubic centimeter. Solar wind speed only 419 kilometers per second. Pretty nominal solar minimum situation there. There's the ACE data looking corroborative to me. I've taken the liberty to draw in this 70 solar flux units line here, this orange line you see. 10.7 centimeter radial flux back down to 68, but there is activity increasing. And again, I forecasted a sunspot popping up. Let's talk about disaster preparedness. September is disaster preparedness month. So are you prepared? Are you a prepper? I mean, let's talk about some misconceptions about the way plants work. Now, we're talking about David Dubine's book here, Climate Revolution, and we're just using this as a visual because people think that plants just sit around producing oxygen and eating up carbon dioxide, which is true in some ways. What a lot of people don't understand about photosynthesis is that photosynthesis allows plants to make glucose. Now, guess what plants do when they make glucose? They consume the glucose through a process that you do too. It's called cellular respiration. So some of the oxygen that's released during the photosynthesis process gets breathed back in order to process the glucose. And guess what happens then? Plants emit carbon dioxide. That's right, plants exhale just like you do. Their cellular respiration process is no different than yours. On a related note, carbon dioxide is not a pollutant, and it is not a greenhouse gas on this planet. Now, if you're going to cite the fact that Venus is very hot because there's the major atmospheric component on the planet is carbon dioxide, I can't argue with you there. But that's not the way it works on this planet. The main component here is obviously nitrogen, and then the other 20% is approximately 20% oxygen. So it's like about 80-20 nitrogen, oxygen. Everything else is a trace gas, including CO2. Now, I'm not going to get into how much humans produce and how much the oceans produce and carbon sinks, but I will say that carbon sequestration is a stupid idea. And if you support political candidates such as AOC and Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders and other dummies that don't understand the first thing about physics, much less atmospheric physics, much less how photosynthesis works, and they want to scrub the carbon out of the atmosphere, I'm with David Dubine on this one. My carbon dioxide target on this planet is 1,200 parts per million, and we're at like 435 parts per million or something like that now. So we implore you to please increase your carbon footprint. All right, moving on. KP index is at 1 for the past 15 hours. So low solar activity here. Let's look at the magnetosphere movie, starting with the density. Here's 4 hours of density data courtesy University of Michigan Geospace model. We'll let that play through. And then we'll look at the pressure. And here's the pressure data. Not surprisingly very low. Actually, it is surprisingly low. It's quite low magnetohydrodynamic pressure there. And please excuse me, I'll be right back. And yes, I am still wearing my effing shirt. No lie. It's an effing shirt. I've been making clothes for decades. Here's the geospace ground magnetic perturbations. Shrink that down a little bit here. How about 67%? Sounds good. And not a lot going on in the geospace magnetic ground perturbations. We just show it every day to archive 4 hours of data. Again, space modeling framework. We did see a little spike there. Let's go back to that real quick. That one occurring. Let me pause that. Those spikes occurring around 7:38 Universal Time. And let's let the rest of the video play and then move on. as there's quite a bit of stuff to cover, and we're only going to make one video today, at least in terms of the current plan. Although something could happen that causes us to make another one. We're going to be including the censored versus sinkhole section. Here's 6 hours of ionosphere data. And the ionosphere is looking quite discharged on both sides here, daytime and nighttime. That's what I mean when I say both sides. And here's the latest image. Looking pretty anomalous there in the ionosphere. Moving on to the X-ray flux. And we see a ramp up in the low levels here. That looks like the GOES 14. Seeing an uptick in X-ray flux. Otherwise, still not even in the B-class range. We haven't seen a B-class flare since July 7th. Here's a GOES electron flux. Looking pretty smooth and normal here. Nothing to really comment on there. The relativistic electron flux has come off of its ultra-high levels, as these are the highest levels we've seen in a year, just happening like a week ago. So still pretty high, not too high. There's the charging hazards. Nothing to really write home about there. Some minor charging hazards over Tropic of Capricorn. And let me take this opportunity to say, Milky Way Galaxy team for the win. Thanks for tuning in, viewers. If you weren't aware where stuff was located in the solar system, well, that's where stuff is. Every day when the sun rises, we have a massive pile up here where Mercury, Venus, the Sun, and Mars are all in the sky at the same time. And you can't see them because it's daytime. So here's where things will be in 1 week. As a lot of our viewers are most likely interested in planetary motions and so on, please leave a comment if you're worried about your astrological sign or something like that. We're interested in the fact that astronomy is looking more like astrology. The more advanced we get in terms of the real science, the less astronomers can scoff at astronomers. You think I'm kidding? Well, I'm not kidding. GOES magnetometer is smoothing out finally. And here's the Gong 2 data, which is the reason why I'm predicting a sunspot's formation. There's a magnetic tug-of-war going on in the sun. Every time one of the solar polar fields gains or loses strength, that tug-of-war comes to the forefront. And we can see activity here shown in green. That's most likely activity south of the equator. I'm not going to get into why, but that's most likely activity south of the equator. And so I would not be surprised at all if I saw a sunspot form at a low southern latitude. Or you could say a high latitude south of the equator. I guess that's the more appropriate way to state what I'm stating. Forecasting a sunspot forming south of the equator based on the Gong 2 data. There it is. You can see that happening. You can see the tug-of-war. Let's move on to what's going on above my head. It's 3:57 a.m. Do you know where your Cygnus is? Check out in-the-sky.org if you want to make a sky map, figure out what's going on above your head. Let's do an earthquake rundown. Last 24 hours. Make sure we have all of the correct data. We saw just about an hour and a half ago a 3.7 coming in Arkansas, but let's go over the 4.0s plus. We see an outbreak of deep quakes, actually. And let's start in Australia. About 22 and a half hours ago, we see a 4.1 there. Right in the middle of a continent. Check it out. And here's a deep quake at Papua New Guinea. Here's a deep quake at Indonesia. 4.8 and 4.3 respectively. Here's a 4.8 at Peru. That one's also at nearly 100 kilometers depth. Here's a 4.5 at Ecuador. If you live in Western South America, please have an earthquake plan, as you've been seeing deep quakes for ages. And we're still seeing a 7+ magnitude earthquake drought, folks. And guess what happens when you have earthquake droughts? You end up with a major earthquake. Here's a 4.4 at Japan, also at depth. Here's a 4.3 at Japan, not at depth. Here's a 4.1 in Mexico. That one's also not at depth, 48 kilometers. And here's a 600-kilometer deep quake at Fiji. That's a 5.5. That's a real risk. If that happened at the surface, that would be nearly a 7 magnitude quake, the kind of thing that can absolutely generate tsunamis. It's at a flat section in the ocean floor there. There's a location of that quake, 5.5 magnitude and over 600 kilometers depth. So we see an outbreak of deep quakes. Again, I can't reiterate it enough. Have an earthquake plan, as earthquakes and tsunamis are some of the deadliest things on the planet. Here's a 4.9 at Eritrea. An odd place for a quake. I don't think I've ever seen a quake there before in all of my years of earthquake coverage, which that's not very many years. I'm not particularly skilled in the realm of geology. 4.9 at the West Chile Rise, out in the ocean there, toward the Easter Island region of the world, a very desolate portion of the planet, that South Pacific. It's a weird place, folks. Here's a 5.0 at the Kuril Islands, south of Kamchatka. 4.4 at Indonesia, that one's at depth. 4.9 at Fiji, over 500 kilometers there. 4.4 at Fiji, over 550 kilometers there. 4.1 at Kodiak, Alaska, that one's out in the ocean. Another deep quake at Tonga, that one at 278 kilometers depth. An Argentinian quake here, that one at depth also, 121 kilometers. 3.7 at Gassville, Arkansas. I only clicked on it because it's red. And a 4.7 in the Kermadec Islands. That one happening just as I woke up today. So an influx of deep quakes, folks. Let's go down the volcano rundown. We got a Bico producing a 7,000-foot ash plume there. Mount Aso, 7,000-foot ash plume there. Tucono exploding, 6,000-foot ash plume there. And Nevados de Chilean, sporadic puffs, explosive activity, 14,000-foot ash plume. Please do not fly one of John Denver's ultralights over Nevados de Chilean. You may end up like John Denver, or perhaps worse. Here are the jet streams in the Western world. And to call them meridional is to not do them justice, because they are all over the place. We've got large portions of the jet streams going backwards, east to west instead of west to east, and so on. Here's the Eastern world jet streams. We're not going to spend too much time on it, as there are quite a bit of segments to cover yet, and we're already 18 minutes in. So thanks for staying tuned all of this time, folks. Check out lightningmaps.org the next time you hear thunder. And if you're someplace like St. Paul, Minnesota, well, you got hammered yesterday. And you may be back in the crosshairs today. Let's go in depth. But first, let's look at lightning superbolts. This story from What's Up With That? The world's most viewed site on global warming and climate change. It's not an alarmist website. Anyway, if you're interested in large and very, very large lightning strikes, there's a map of where they happen, believe it or not. And we apologize for failing to put links in yesterday's video. We're going to blame Google for this one because the software is so junky. It's nothing but junkware. And if you ever felt boxed in by junkware, well, that's Google. Anyway, links to this article below the video in the description to this What's Up With That page. Somebody has plotted a map about where all the superbolts are located. And it turns out that the majority of them happen in the Eastern Atlantic and just north of Africa in the Mediterranean. Some happen actually on the South American continent, which is very strange, as most of these superbolts happen in the ocean. Read the article if you want to learn something about lightning that you may not have understood. And they do indeed cite the fact that these superbolts could be caused by things like cosmic ray flux. So that's great. That looks like an advancement in the science. We'd like to have an uplifting message, and for that we thank you. Don't worry, we'll stay in our gray box. Let's move on to windy.com's pressure maps. As we look at McMurdo Station, looks like it's going to see a major pressure gradient headed its way as spring is about to arrive at Antarctica. Here's the pressure map on windy.com, who has a great mobile app, by the way. Download it for free. Windy.com. We see a powerful low over Minnesota once again, as well as a powerful anticyclone right next to it. And let's pause it there. That's about 30 hours in there. That's where the pressure cells will be by that point. And let's look at the Weather Channel, who's totally screwing up our settings. Yes, that's right, folks. The software keeps doing things against our will. I know, software used to be for productivity, and now it's essentially to bog down your system with ads. Here's the Weather Channel Doppler radar, and while it looks a little better than AccuWeather, I'm not impressed. Okay, it's acting like junkware. Let's move on. It looked fine when I wasn't recording, but now that I am, sorry. Yuck. Ugh. I wanted to show you this convergence zone here over the eastern Gulf of Mexico. That's a very cosmic ray flux looking interaction going on there. Now, for those of you who don't understand atmospheric physics in the slightest, realize that the moist air on here, depicted in colors like yellow and orange, I'm sorry, the dry air depicted in colors like yellow and orange is much more massive than this moist air that you see depicted in colors like blue, purple, and pink. And things like conductivity are super important into the way things like your atmosphere work. The sky is electric, folks. And anyway, check out that convergence zone. That is an interesting zone there. We're seeing a counterclockwise rotation start to kick up. So don't be surprised if these areas of moisture start to cannibalize each other. Although that is a lot of dry air for a true tropical system to form. If you're located a little farther north here, located where this extremely powerful low pressure system is, I would note massive streamers coming out of the south of this. The southwest portion, you see all those wavy lines and this long stripe here? That's electromagnetic fields in the atmosphere, folks. I don't know what else to tell you. That's just how it works. And if you're located in the path of these storms, please be prepared, as they are going to be nasty, just like they were yesterday. You can see a lot of moisture just coming off the map here. That's because a lot of rain is falling in very fast fashion. So if you're wondering what will happen and the Doppler radar is not telling you, check out the water vapor map. And it's time for the censored versus sinkhole section. First, let's talk about torts. A tort is a wrongful act other than a breach of contract because you don't have real contracts with big tech companies, for which relief may be obtained in the form of damages or an injunction. Well, why am I talking about this? Well, because big tech is a massive scam. Google, Facebook, Apple, and Twitter can't break the internet, but the internet can break them. Note all the lawsuits that are currently in progress and are perfectly valid lawsuits against these tortuous companies with their torturous junkware, bloating your computer and wasting your time, which they can never repay. Let's talk about Hillary. But before we talk about Hillary, let's talk about the future of social media, minds.com. Check out our thumbnail yesterday, Mummify Bernie, etc. We talk about nature and vultures and all kinds of stuff like this. We even talk about quotes from Al Sharpton, because resist we much, we must, and we will much about that. Be committed. I guess to a mental institution until we're able to compose a coherent sentence in the English language, if we're Al Sharpton, by the way. And that's a real quote. I didn't make that up. So yeah, Mummify Bernie. Did you see our video yesterday? We talked extensively about Lenin's mummification chamber. Vladimir Lenin is the creator of the term democratic socialism. He made up the term to fool Soviet voters, future Soviet voters. We called them Russians before the Soviet Union. He was trying to trick them into voting for a communist. Because what's the point of socialism? Well, communism, of course. Hey, it's straight out of the mouth of Lenin, folks. I'm not making this stuff up. Have you become a Patreon yet? I mean, you want to see this stuff first? Don't join the $1 level, because you'll lose your membership on October 31st. Join the $9.99 level and see what we put up first. Here's the Clinton article, courtesy of the Climate Nonsense Network. Or you could call it the Communist News Network. Here's Hillary. Guess where? Out front tonight, Trump is pushing a new. Guess where she is? She's in Venice. And why is she in Venice? Because she's sitting at a replica of some desk. I don't know. There's some desk from the Oval Office or something. And she's sitting there reading a 60,000-page document that was released as a piece of art. So apparently, tens of thousands of felonies that were hacked from a private server, which were supposed to only be on government State Department servers, are now a piece of art. And Hillary thought it would be cute to pose for this photo op. I love it. We've got links to this article in the description from the Communist News Network. And it's just amazing. It's an artistic way of making the same point that I made in the book I wrote. What happened? Hillary continued. And that is, there is nothing wrong with nothing wrong should have been so controversial. Just tens of thousands of felonies, each chargeable as an individual felony. I don't know how many thousands of years she would face in jail if she was actually charged with any of this stuff, but welcome to America. We have two justice systems. If you have hundreds of millions of dollars, you're not part of that justice system. Let's talk about tax dollars being wasted. Some Democrats concerned as judiciary sets impeachment rules. How about winning the election? They're trying to get rid of Trump any way they possibly can because they lack a candidate who's viable. Who are they going to run? Joe Biden? What's he going to do? Bleed out his eyes? Who are they going to run? Liz Warren? Who are they going to run? Seriously, Bernie Sanders? Are you kidding me? The Democrat Party needs a moderate candidate for president. You think Michelle Obama's going to swing in on one of Bernie Sanders' chandeliers and save the election for the Democrat Party? Not happening. Not happening. Tom Hanks has a better chance of getting elected than Joe Biden does. Good luck with that. Anyway, the Democrats are wasting your taxpayer dollars by trying to figure out how to impeach Trump. The best way to impeach a president is to come up with actual evidence of high crimes and misdemeanors. Let's move on to some science articles. A super interesting one. Shout out to the Meerkat telescope in South Africa. You see that? Those are radio bubbles surrounding the galactic core of our own galaxy, Sagittarius A star. You see that? Does that look a little bit like the Primer fields to you folks? Does that give you an indication of where you're even located in reference to Sagittarius A star as well as its tilt? Well, it absolutely does. And these gray areas here, these are the radio images collected by the Meerkat telescope from South Africa. Brilliant article. There's another image in a different color mode. And this is an indication that we're looking at a slightly skewed angle of the galactic core. We're not right on the galactic plane. It takes millions of years to cross this. And crossing the galactic plane has nothing to do with Earth's catastrophe cycle. It might have something to do with it, but it's clearly not a 12,000-year cycle. If anybody tells you it is, like some YouTube channels that don't understand the physics, come leave a comment on our channel. We'll try to be rational about the science. Anyway, read the article, seriously. It's super good. It's going to be all over the newswire, so don't be surprised when you see more stuff about this article today. Were you aware that we see some evidence of the black hole at the center of the galaxy getting hungrier? Well, this Phys.org article is talking about it. We just saw an infrared flash that occurring like a month ago, I think. And we also saw SO2, which is a blue supergiant near the galactic core, making its closest approach during summer of 2018. One of the theories is that a large quantity of gas was siphoned off of one of those massive, massive stars. And those stars are so massive, by the way, folks, that they have a solar wind about 10 times. So if it's, 600 kilometers per second solar wind from the sun, it's going to be 6,000 kilometers per second from these stars. And the density is the same deal. It's, you see a density of 10,000 or 12,000 protons per cubic centimeter out of these stars. If you want to follow the transient outbursts of Sagittarius A star, just head to the Neil Gorell Swift Observatory and hit find and type in SGR space A. And you'll see Sagittarius A star entry number 688 for some reason. And there are the transients from Sagittarius A star. If you're wondering what happened around day 240, it's missing data. All of the data points show missing data there. If you're concerned about it, send an email. The observatory will respond. Ever wondered what's going on at the center of the galaxy? Well, here's an animation of it. Dear YouTube, please don't ban us for putting up information about stuff we cover on a daily basis, known as cosmology. Anyway, these blue supergiant stars are rotating in this sort of a fashion around some massive radio source. Now, we don't call it a black hole because that's not science. And stay tuned for a bonus feature, folks. Oh, it's just the 193 angstrom view. As we haven't viewed it yet, we do see a coronal hole there very far south. And again, there's a coronal mass ejection headed toward the Earth. You probably heard it here first, as we covered it only about 3 hours after it happened. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. Remember, stare at the sun. If you don't stare at the sun, you're not going to know what's going on. Stare at our channel. Please like and subscribe. Please become our next patron. And remember, when you're staring at the sun, don't drink. And if you drink, stare at the sun anyway. Just don't drive. And since it'll never be now again, may the solar wind be at your back and the atherosclerosis absent from your veins.